thought my fiancé was gone, so I had the worst shock ever when the door opened. Then this happened.
Hey Redditors, long-time lurker but first-time poster. I've always been a huge fan of Reddit, and it has always been one of my favorite social media, but I never expected that one day I'd be here in Reddit posting and asking for advice. I guess life isn't always what you expect. I am currently in such a shitty position, I don't even know what to do. I am distraught. I am hoping that by posting here, I'll get reasonable advice on what to do next, or some semblance of peace, since I've always been told that talking about your problems helps them. I cheated on my husband with his best friend, and I currently do not know how to go about appeasing him. I am in such a bad place. I know what I did was wrong, but for the sake of our marriage, I need him to forgive me. If my husband doesn't not forgive me, then I am literally ruined. I know you're probably wondering what happened, so backstory first. I am Arya, a 28 female, and my husband Jimin, a 29 male, have been married for 2 years, and we live in California in the United States of America. We met at a summer music festival. We both liked the same indie band playing on the main stage, so we ended up dancing together in the crowd. We connected, and I even remember joking that he shared a name with the popular singer Jimin from BTS, which made him laugh. It was as if something clicked between us. We shared dreams and made promises, and Jimin became my rock. He was such a sweet and caring guy and didn't care that I was so out of his league. For context, so you understand where I'm coming from, my husband Jimin is a chaebol. For those that don't know what a chaebol is a very large South Korean family-owned conglomerate, so basically large families-owned companies. The kids of those families are called chaebols, and they are called this because they are very rich. And I don't mean regular rich, I mean the 1% rich, the top untouchable rich. These few families are like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates of South Korea, and that's the kind of family my husband came from. I, on the other hand, grew up on the bad side of town in the US and lived on food stamps. So yes, me and my husband came from 2 different worlds. I was so surprised when he proposed to me within a year of dating and then introduced me to his family. Of course, his family did not like me. To them, I was from the wrong race, wrong nationality, and poor. What could their son want from me? Chaebols have a strict rule of marrying from other influential families, so they couldn't believe my husband wanted me. Trust me, it was something that stunned me, lol. I had always thought stuff like this only existed in. So I was really surprised to find out the power hierarchy. Stuff was real. My husband had to give me a quick rerun of everything to know about chaebols and Korea and stuff to do and not do. So it was really disheartening when they didn't like me. They said I was a gold digger and tried to convince my husband, but of course my husband didn't listen. And in a few months we were married. To quell my husband's family's fear, I suggested signing a prenup. And even though my husband disagreed, he finally caved in when I insisted and made me sign a prenup. The marriage went smoothly. It was a very small wedding at a small church, and we invited just a few friends and family members. I didn't want something large because I hated being around crowds, and he respected that. I remember telling him the words, "I do." To be honest, I was scared of getting married because I didn't want it to hold me down. But eventually I summoned up the courage because I loved my husband. Like I said before, my husband was from a very rich family. In fact, he was the next in line heir to be CEO until he stepped down for his younger brother. I remember it caused a huge falling out in his family because my husband was my father-in-law's choice to be CEO. My father-in-law could not understand why my husband would turn down being CEO, but my husband said he didn't really want the stress that came with that, plus the fact that we would have to move back to South Korea and have to travel a lot. He just didn't want that stress. So my husband became a bit of a part-time teacher. He only went to work on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays, so Wednesdays and Thursdays were his days off during the weekdays. While it was hilarious, I know you're probably shocked. I found it hilarious too. My husband was a second-generation heir to one of the biggest countries in South Korea. So how does one go from that to becoming a common part-time teacher? But the thing is, my husband has always been humble, and it didn't really bother him. He didn't care what his status was and didn't want to be bored at home, so he took the job. That didn't stop his family from mocking him, lol. They mocked him for weeks as they found it hilarious and insulting to their family name. Because of my husband's family's wealth, I also didn't need to work. but I didn't want to be a stay-at-home wife as I thought that would be too boring. So I decided to pursue my passion, which was hairstyling. I was very good at it and decided to operate my own store, which Jimin bought for me. Within a few weeks of opening my store, I decided I needed to get serious. And I mean serious. I was seriously making money there because I was really good at hairstyling, and I didn't have much competition. So I decided to give my store an upgrade. Of course, Jimin had no qualms giving me money for that. I had a full-on remake of my store and got a receptionist and some other hairstylists, so it wouldn't just be me in the store, and we'd attend to customers quicker. And within months, I knew I made the right decision. Business was booming, so I hired even more stylists. I was now more management and less hands-on at the job because I had a lot of stylists working for me. One day, someone came into the store to look for me. He didn't have an appointment and didn't sound like someone I knew at all. But I wasn't busy, so I told the receptionist to let him in. The moment he came in, I was surprised. He was really handsome, and I mean it. My husband, Jimin, is very handsome, tall, pale skin, and long hair, but there was something about this guy that just really drew me in like a forbidden fruit. He introduced himself and told me his name was Minjun, but that I could call him by his English name, Michael. He was Korean, just like my husband. It was something I thought was interesting at that moment, but didn't give much thought to it until I later found out he was my husband's best friend. He said he was looking for a job as a hairstylist. I was honestly taken aback at first because nothing about this guy screamed stylist, but I had always learned to never judge a book by its cover, so I decided to give him a chance. I let him try his hands on a dummy, and I was astounded. He was good, like really good, amazing even. I wasn't really looking for a stylist then because I had enough stylists at the store, but Michael's skills were just too good to pass on, so I employed him. He fit in like a perfect glove. Everybody loved Michiel. He was funny, handsome, charming. In fact, he was perfect. The customers loved him because he was exceptionally skilled and really handsome. In fact, a lot of them would refuse to be worked on by any stylist except Michiel Lol. Some would even wait till he was free, if they came and he was busy. The other co-workers, stylists, on the other hand, loved him because he was so handsome, nice, and patient with them, even the ones that weren't officially stylists but were going through training or something. Few months in, though, and I realized there was something about Michael. He was just different. Michael had a lot of passion for the job, but it was obvious he had never worked a day in his life before, at least to me. As someone who grew up in the slums and lived on food stamps, it was pretty easy to pick out a person that had never known suffering in his life, and Michiel was that person. He did not carry himself like someone that needed to work. He carried himself like someone that wanted to work. And I know you might be wondering, oh, what do you mean by that? You don't know what you're saying. But just hear me out. There's a certain way that a person carries themselves that you just know that they're different. I'm guessing I noticed it because Michael carried himself the same way my husband carries himself, like he was on a whole different level from everybody. No, they weren't proud. My husband was definitely the most humble and kindest person I knew, and Michiel too was definitely not proud, but they were just different. They stood out from the crowd in a good way. It was something I also mentioned to my husband after our first date, about how the way he carried himself was different. My husband was amused LOL, but told me that chaebols were usually taught to be well-rounded in all areas from birth, and maybe it was that. Besides, those weren't the only things I noticed about Michiel. I also noticed the kind of clothes he wore. They were very expensive, lol, and also the cars he drove. Everyone in the store thought Michiel didn't have a car, but what they didn't know was that he actually had a driver that always dropped him a few blocks away from the store in the morning and waited right at that spot to pick him up when he closed. I had only noticed it by chance when I came very early to work a few times. Michiel was always very early to work. In fact, he was usually the first to arrive, and usually also the last to leave. I had noticed that it was the same person every time, so it couldn't be an Uber. And also, the cars the driver drove were very expensive. Initially, I had thought that maybe the driver was Michael's boyfriend or husband, but I had to dismiss that train of thoughts, because Michael himself one time during discussions in the store admitted that he was straight and single, and also, I noticed the interactions between the driver and Michiel were too sparsy and dry for them to be together. I know this sounds like I'm invested in Michiel lol, but I was actually intrigued. He was like a puzzle, difficult to unravel. In fact, he was an enigma, if you would call him that. During all these puzzling, Michael and I started to grow closer. We had a lot in common. We both loved hairstyling, and we were very good at it. We loved movies and art, and we had a ton of other stuff that we had in common. I am naturally a very introverted and shy person, but Michael just made speaking easy and effortless. With him, I felt like I could truly be myself. Maybe that should have been the first red flag in my head, but back then, I just didn't care. I had always grown up thinking people didn't like me and even had some abandonment issues. So when someone very attractive, apart from my husband, started showing me attention, I gobbled it up. One day, I remember it being a Wednesday. I had forgotten my laptop at home, and since it was my husband's day off, he brought it to the store for me. The receptionist and everyone knows him there, so he doesn't get stopped at the receptionist's desk or anything. So imagine my surprise when I, in my office, heard my husband happily say someone's name like Minjun Wo. At first, I wondered who Minjun was and if he was a customer before remembering that Mikhail was Minjun, and he had told me that when he came to apply for a job. I got up from my desk and went to look because I was curious. There was my husband hugging Mikhail, so they knew each other, and from the way they were hugging, they seemed pretty close. We went into my office so as not to cause a ruckus for customers getting their hair done, and my husband then introduced Michial as his best friend and a chibol, and that was when it clicked. Now I knew why I was so curious about him, why I was so intrigued. He was a chibol. His family was very rich. That was when I realized why I thought he was so similar to my husband. At first I was stunned, then amused. Why was someone from a family that owned one of the biggest companies in South Korea working as a stylist in my store? Lol. Of course I questioned Michiel about it, to which he told me he had been bored and had always liked styling hairs, hence why he applied. He was also trying to show his family that hairstyling wasn't a fool's errand, hence why he was working. His family held the belief that hairstyling wasn't something he should bother himself with, since he would inherit the company someday, but he had always loved hairstyling. I also found out from my husband that Michael was currently in America because he was refusing to go back home to Korea. I also questioned another thing. Why wasn't Michael at our wedding? My husband said Michiel was his best friend, but he had never told me about him, nor did I see him at the wedding. My husband, however, explained that that was because he and Michiel had been going through a rough patch then and weren't in touch. Remember the rules I told you guys about chibols marrying other chibols and influential families? Well, apparently everyone had assumed lol, even though they weren't dating, that my husband would marry Michael's sister to merge the two families together because they were so similar in status and that it would be good for business. So they were appalled when my husband had brought me along and said he was going to marry me. Hence, another reason why they didn't approve of our marriage. Also, Michael's sister had a crush on my husband, so she was really crushed that my husband had married someone else. And that's why Mikhail had gotten angry at my husband, and they had a falling out until a few months ago when Mikhail finally reached out and apologized. I was really stunned and also questioned about why my husband didn't tell me about it. But my husband said during that time he didn't think it was necessary, and the thing really put him in a bad mood. Then, so he didn't want to talk about it. I kind of understood him as I can really relate to not wanting to talk about something that brings bad memories, and I let it go. But it really brought us closer. Michael told me all about the embarrassing things my husband did in childhood, Lowell, and all the things I didn't know about him. My husband is not a secretive person by any means and is very open with me, but Michael has known him since childhood, so there was a lot of stuff that he knew, Lowell. It brought us closer, and soon we were hanging out solo. Sometimes we would go watch a movie or go to an art gallery to see an exhibition, stuff like that. I started getting excited to go to work in the morning because I knew Michael was usually the first one there, and we would talk and relate before the others would come. And I also didn't leave as early as I used to from work because I knew Michael was usually the last to leave, and we would also chat and have fun. Sometimes we would go out for breakfast in the morning before anyone came, or we would go out for dinner in the evening. I guess that was when I started falling for him. I should have known he was a liar, but he just looked too innocent. He was also just too charming for my own good. The second red flag that should have gone off in my head was the fact that his sister was supposed to marry my husband. But I overlooked that, since I thought he was already over it since he reached out to my husband to apologize. Another red flag that I should have also noticed going off in my head was the fact that he insisted on hanging out with me without my husband present. Honestly, I noticed everything, even when he flirted with me and I flirted back. But I was just so flattered that somebody actually wanted me that I didn't even notice the foolish hole I was digging myself into. That was why I didn't resist when he first kissed me. I recoiled at first and thought of my husband, but Michel convinced me that my husband would never know, and so I fell into his honeyed traps. We started having a secret affair. The mornings before everyone would come in for work that we used to talk and go out for breakfast were now times we would be intimate. Sometimes we would also wait before everyone left, before becoming intimate. We were like two stupid rabbits. Sometimes I would tell my husband I had to walk overtime at work, just so I could stay with Michael, or sometimes while my husband was at work, I would go over to the house with Michael. I think about a week ago or something, my father-in-law fell sick. It was bad, or so they said. My husband knew that he had to fly back to South Korea because he knew that there would be a crazy power tussle in the family and company if my father-in-law, who was the current CEO, died. They didn't give us specifics about what was wrong with my father-in-law except from telling us it was bad and that he was in the hospital. My husband wanted to fly back with me, but I refused because frankly his family didn't like me. So why bother, and also how would I keep up my affair with Michael if I was in South Korea? So I used my business as an excuse and told him I didn't trust my workers enough to leave them on their own for the time that we would be in South Korea. Of course, my husband was very disappointed, but he decided to leave me and flew back alone. I was ecstatic. Yes, I know I'm disgusting and a vile cheater. How could I be ecstatic that my husband traveled to see my ill father-in-law? But honestly, I feel like that time there was a veil hanging over my eyes. It was as if I wasn't the one doing those actions. Now I regret it, and if I could go back in time, I would not make the same mistakes either way. During that period, Michel and I started using I and my husband's house as our meeting point. We started meeting up regularly at the house since my husband was away. Of course, I called my husband regularly and asked for updates so as not to seem callous and be a caring wife. My husband said he didn't think my father-in-law's illness was as bad as they made it seem, and that he didn't think he was dying anything soon, but that he would stay for a while just to be sure. I was gladdened by that, of course. In as much as the fact that my father-in-law did not like me, he was still my husband's father, and him dying now would disorganize a lot of things. Either way, Michael and I continued using I and my husband's house as our meeting point, and because I was getting regular updates from my husband, I really did not think he was coming anything soon. Oh, how I was so wrong. Yesterday, Michael and I decided to meet up at the house, as we regularly did since my husband left. We jumped on each other as soon as we got into the house and began getting intimate. We hadn't even really gone far when I heard the door to the bedroom open and in walked in my husband with a luggage in his hands. I was stunned. I never heard the front door opening or the gate or anything of that sort, so I was really, really shocked. I was so invested in being intimate with Michel and didn't even think my husband was coming today that I hadn't even thought to listen for any noises, hence why I never heard anything. Cue me rushing to cover myself with the bed sheets and Michael lazily picking his clothes and putting it on. Yes, I mean, lazily. He wasn't rushing, which would be the normal response in a situation like this. In fact, he had a stupid grin on his face. And I remember wondering why he was smiling, but I was too bothered by my husband's silence to even care. Michael put on his clothes and left. My husband was still standing by the door. He looked so surprised. It was obvious he was not expecting this at all. He was silent for a while, and then he went crazy, and I mean crazy. He started silently screaming. You know the kind of screaming where the person is obviously screaming, but there's no sound coming out from their mouth. He destroyed everything in the house, and I mean everything. All the expensive artworks, expensive items I collected, mirrors, everything went down, and then he just sat down and looked so defeated. I feel so guilty. My husband is the calmest person I know, so realizing I pushed him to this state makes me feel guilty. He has left the house now, and I do not know what to do. I am so scared I feel like my marriage is over, and I destroyed it myself. What do I do? Apart from the mayhem he evoked in the house, he did not say a word or even look at me. I honestly need your advice. Please help. Update. Hello, Reddit. It's been a while. About a month to be exact. I honestly said I wasn't going to post on here again because back then when I made that post, I was honestly looking for advice and just needed someone to talk to. Either way, a lot of people have been coming to my DMs asking for updates and wanting to know what happened. So here's everything that has gone down since. First of all, my husband, or should I say ex-husband, and I are getting a divorce. No dramatics, no long story. He doesn't want to work on the marriage, doesn't want counseling, just a divorce. He feels like I've ultimately betrayed him and that there's no coming back from this. He has presented me with divorce papers to sign, and I know that I do not have a good case in court. I might not even get a settlement. First of all, we had a prenuptial agreement in place. Second of all, we do not even have any children together as we decided that we weren't ready yet, so I can't file for child support. Third, he has evidence of me cheating. Yes, I was as shocked as you are when I found out. My husband knew, and he found out through the good old-fashioned way that a lot of people have been caught through texts. He found out through my text messages, but he didn't know who I was cheating on him with, and he really wanted to find out, hence why he waited and didn't confront me. And yes, the red flags that went off in my head were right. Michael was the devil himself. Michael only got with me to destroy my marriage, and I'm not even joking or being dramatic here. He told me this himself, apparently. My husband wanted to surprise me with his presence, so he had texted Michael earlier that day and asked him if I was at the store, to which Michael had said yes, even though Michael knew that we would be at home. He had set it up so my husband would come home and meet us at home, and he had been right. My husband had come home to drop off his luggage before coming to the store to surprise me, and had met the shock of his life. As to why Michael did it, he told me he only did it because he was curious as to why my husband would pick me over his sister. Now that my husband has finally seen my true colors, he will go back to his sister. My husband had really been enraged on finding out that the person I had been cheating on him with had been his best friend, and that was why he went on such a crazy spree around the house. He said he had expected anyone but Michael. Also, because of the prenuptial agreement in place, I won't be getting much money even if I was to get a settlement. Here's why: after my husband stepped down from being heir, his main source of income became his teaching job, because my husband refused to become CEO after my father-in-law. My father-in-law wanted to cut my husband off, but my mother-in-law refused and still funded my husband. My husband also had a hefty trust fund in place, so even if my mother-in-law hadn't funded him, my husband still wouldn't have gone broke. Knowing how smart my husband is, I'm sure he has already transferred every single fund he got from his mother back to her, and also the trust fund is something he had before we got married, so I won't be getting any access to that. Then again, this is all speculation, as I honestly don't know for sure. We'll be meeting in court soon, and then I'll know. In the meantime, I guess I'm going to arm myself with a lawyer because I am no expert on legal matters. Safe to see I've ruined my entire marriage and I am solely to blame. I just wish my husband had chosen to work on our marriage instead of a divorce. I am not a saint. I have my fair share of flaws and I have done my husband wrong. But I mean, we should have sat down as adults and discussed everything and not act irrational like he did. We should have tried counseling. Did I also mention my husband has sold the store he bought for me? Yes, he did, and now I have no source of income. I'm back to square one. And do you know what hurts the most? It's the fact that I'm the only one taking the blame and the fall. Despite the fact that Michael seduced me, he's getting no blame. He has gone back to South Korea, and his life is just peachy. I'll probably go broke after this and have to pick myself up right from square one again. But Michael will get no consequence at all. I still hope that one day, though, that karma comes for him. Also, the fact that I proved my in-laws right also hurts. I know they are probably throwing a feast and telling my husband how they were right. Well, I hope someone learns from my situation and mistakes. Thanks for listening, honestly. I got baited by my own husband, and now he is mad and angry just because I ended up doing exactly what he told me to do. Whatever happened to never biting more than you can chew? He thought I would chicken out so he could taunt me for as long as he wanted, but I refused, and now he is mad at me. He is trying to make life difficult for me, but it's not my fault that he decided to bring up a Daro, and now he's the one that chickened out. I know that he's trying to dump me, and that's why I'm here on Reddit to ask you all if what I did was wrong. He has visited almost every single family member of mine to complain about me. Not once in any of his complaints did he state or agree that he had anything to do with my decision. He's just trying to play dumb and act like he didn't bait me into doing what I did. My name is Lupita, and I'm a 28-year-old African-American living in New Jersey. I work at a restaurant as a chef and baker. Unfortunately, I can't mention the name of the restaurant I work at. I'm married to a 32-year-old restaurant owner called Frederick. My husband is the owner of the restaurant I work at. I know it's a very weird setup, but unfortunately, I find myself in such a situation. I actually met Frederick at his restaurant, and I didn't even know he owned the restaurant. In case some people will try to make it seem like I married Frederick because he's a restaurant owner, let me just put it out there that I never had any of those intentions. I actually come from a well-to-do family, and my parents provided me with more than enough. I married out of love. It was never about the money for me. I just finished my internship before I met Frederick at the restaurant. I was literally just stopping by for lunch with my friends, and then he walked in. He had other workers, but that day, he casually strolled in and just walked up to the counter. My friends noticed I liked him immediately, and I didn't even try to hide it. By that time, I didn't even know he was the owner. I thought he was a regular customer. It was only a few days later, after that restaurant suddenly became my favorite restaurant because of him. Lal and I visited it almost every day, that I found out he owned it. We became friends and hit it off pretty quickly. That is just the story of how we met. But now I guess we're about to become worst enemies, lol. We got married 2 years after dating, and it was a very weird kind of wedding. If you ask me why, I'll just tell you that it was because my family and his family are not really the highest fans of each other. I don't even need to pretend, so I'll get straight to the point. I don't like his mother at all. That woman just picks at me every chance she gets, so I don't like her. She also seems to dislike me just as much as I dislike her, but we pretend to like each other at family functions when it's completely necessary. My father doesn't really like Frederick because, according to him, owning a restaurant is not a real job as far as you solely depend on your customers' turnout, which can change any time. But even though we have a rough family relationship, we loved each other too much to let our family get in the way, so that's how we ended up married. I've been married to Frederick for 3 years now, but we don't have a child together yet. If you ask me why, I'll just tell you it's because I'm not really ready to have children yet. It's my body and it's my choice. Frederick never had a problem with that, and he's been very supportive in that regard. I started working at his restaurant just 6 months after we got married. I used to work with my dad before, but I decided to work with Frederick instead because I knew that he was not comfortable with me being on my dad's payroll when the both of them are not really friends. I like working with my husband, and it started off as a weird experience, but I was able to get used to it. Now, I think I'm going to be jobless in the next few weeks because I'm very certain that my husband and I are going to break up. Or, let me just put it this way, I'm very sure that Frederick is going to dump me. You all have waited enough, so let me tell you what's going on and how we got to this place we are currently at. Even though all through the beginning of this write-up, I've sounded like a stuck-up lady, I'm not like that at all. It's all talk and no action because I'm actually a very conservative person. I'm not wild and I don't explore things every day. I'm just very opinionated, and I talk about my opinions, but I never really speak about it. My husband knows I'm a talkative, and I am very active at home, but not in the public space. I used to be that girl that likes to explore before, but I grew out of it before I got married. My conservative nature and nonchalantness has grown bigger over the past few years, and my husband has noticed too. He's always asking me why I suddenly stopped attending parties with him and whatnot. Sometimes, Frederick accused me of being too shy. I'm not shy, and it's far from it. I always tell him that, but he never believes me. I know myself, and I know that one reason that I don't do any wild stuff anymore is because I feel like I should act differently since I'm married and that I shouldn't really let myself get out of character. Another reason is because I'm a rebellious child, and I've always been a rebellious child. I've not done any wild things in the past, but my parents always taunt me and tell me that I like to do the opposite of what I'm told. That's why they believe I rebelled against them by marrying Frederick. I kind of just grew out of my rebellious phase and decided to be more calm and put together. I've tried to explain this to my husband several times, but he just doesn't get it. Our discussions about the way I was shy in public always gets me annoyed, and that's because he always takes it too far. If I say he takes it too far, then that's because it's the truth. I have a very big sense of humor, so anything that annoys me is really annoying, lol. Frederick suddenly became this guy that's interested in clubs and nights out. He wasn't like that while we dated and for the early years of our marriage. I think the issue is that both of us just turned into the exact opposite of ourselves. I used to think that was a good thing because we helped each other find ourselves, but I guess that's a very bad thing. Frederick began to invite me to clubs that he was invited to. At first, I didn't care about attending any of those clubs, but then I realized that there was every possibility of me getting cheated on if I just let my husband go to nightclubs alone. I wanted to blend in and be the Gen Z wife, so I thought, why not? We don't have children yet, so going to clubs all night wasn't a big deal. But I didn't expect Frederick to actually expect me to participate in the clubbing. My main reason for going was to keep an eye on him and make sure that he wasn't doing anything absurd. I also wanted to support my husband and engage in activities with him because I've been told that's what supportive partners do. That's how I found myself in the absurd situation that's going to cause our marriage now. Explore. That word means a lot more than it should me. Frederick wanted us to explore, and now we're exploring the prospects of getting divorced. Please forgive me, guys, if you find my sense of humor too annoying. I just can't help it. I'm at the verge of getting divorced, and I still can't help but make jokes even as I write this. I have to be fast because my mom has invited me to the house to ask my side of the story. Apparently, Frederick had also visited my parents, and now they want to hear from me first. Thankfully, my dad is not a big fan of Frederick, and he doesn't associate with him a lot, so that means he'll obviously believe me before he even gives Frederick a chance to speak. Now let's get back to what we're saying. So Frederick and I decided to go to the parties together, but he had a problem with me not dancing like the rest of the girls. I told him I'm not ready for that kind of fun yet, and I tried to make him understand that it would not be proper for me to act that way in front of his friends. He never listened to me at all. Frederick owns a restaurant, but he doesn't need to be present every day. Eek his wife, so I don't need to report to work every day. So, we can party all night if we want. And that's what we started doing. I just followed him for a show and I never got involved. Frederick complained at first, but as time went on, he stopped. One of the things I like about him is his ability to listen to me and give up when he notices that I'm not really into something. I always liked that about him, her. Recently, it seems like he's decided to do the exact opposite of what he used to do before. Initially, it was just a joke between us. It was never anything serious, and we always just joked about it. Sometimes the joke gets to me, and I get really frustrated. I mean, I'm a wife, so I obviously get affected when my husband compares to other women. No woman would like that, and even though I act very nonchalant and hardcore, I'm not that nonchalant. I always laughed it off, but began to get to me, and then I started resenting the jokes he made. At some point, I needed to get everything off my chest, so I decided to speak to one of my sisters about it. I have 3 sisters and a stepbrother. My sisters and I are very close, and they are all married. I'm the firstborn girl, but I got married last. I wonder why, Lowell. I'm closer to Nadia, my immediate younger sister, and so I spoke to her about my condition with Frederick. We initially laughed about it because it was a very weird and unlikely situation, but as time went on, I realized that speaking to my sister about it made me realize that I might have been overacting. So, I decided to calm down and just give it a try. I promised myself to make Frederick see my point of view without causing a bridge between us. My sister also advised me not to say no the next time he asked. I also wanted to give Frederick a taste of his medicine by showing him that I'm just respecting him by not engaging his taunts. It was a joke to us, and my sister and I never took it seriously. But I guess not, the situation is extremely serious. 3 weeks ago, my husband got invited to his best friend's bachelor party. My husband decided that it would be nice to invite me too, and I agreed without a single thought. It was 2 days after agreeing that I realized that I might have made the wrong choice. I realized that the bachelor party was something the groom had organized for the guts, but he gave them permission to invite their partners if they wanted. I heard that his reason was because he didn't want any of his friends' wives accusing him of making their husbands do crazy things. In other words, he didn't want to be the cause of anyone's broken marriage. The bride also organized her own bachelor party or bridal shower. Whatever it is called, I don't really know. But I don't really know the bride, and I'm not close to her, so I thought it was best to attend the groom's bachelor party, since he's the one I'm close to. The party was 2 weeks ago, and I got ready for it for days. The The party took place at a hotel just a few minutes' drive away from our house, so there was no reason for us to travel anywhere. I heard it was a customer-themed party, so I decided to go as my favorite character in The Queen's Gambit. I had no particular reason for going as a movie character. I just wanted to be different. My husband went as something I'm not really familiar with, and I don't remember who he tried to emulate. Anyway, we got dressed and got ready for the party quite early. I didn't plan on wearing a mask, and I didn't even buy one because I didn't believe that it would look good on my dress. I actually dyed my hair red just because I wanted to get into the character quite well. The only difference was that I didn't curl or try to make it look like any of those royal-themed ones. I just left his street and tied it into a high ponytail. When we arrived at the party, I immediately knew that I had made the wrong decision. Everything was wild, and a lot of things were going on all at once. I couldn't believe that a person that planned to get married the next day was throwing something so controversial. I, for one, was very happy that I didn't let Frederick go alone. It would have really made me quite angry if he came back and showed me the pictures and videos of the wild party he attended alone. To all the girls out there, both single and married or in a relationship, never let your man or future man go to a bachelor's party alone. He needs supervision because the thing that goes on at bachelor parties nowadays is just too chaotic and extra. I'm not in a position to give advice because I am currently going through the consequences of entertaining a bachelor's party. But I guess it is easier to advise other people, don't you think? So let me get back to the main point now. When we attended the party, I realized that there were actually masks there and it was compulsory for us to wear them. I've seen many such things like that in movies, and I knew it never ended well. I told my husband we shouldn't do it because it would be hard to recognize each other, but he told me it would be disrespectful to the HOs if we refused to follow the protocol. So, he took one of the lighters that we arranged on the table I assumed was dedicated to people interested in smoking, and then he used it to burn the edges of our masks so it would be easier for us to recognize each other. He didn't want to burn mine at first because he stated that it wouldn't be hard to locate me since I was literally the only one wearing the type of fustum I chose. Yes, guys, I ended up being as different as I anticipated I'd be. His was important because the kind of costume he wore was similar to most of the ones that were worn by other people. I knew that even with the burnt masks, I'd still find it hard to locate him. I was worried about that at first, but Frederick assured me that we wouldn't even need to look for each other, because we would be standing together all through. That calmed me down a little, and then I decided to relax and just have fun, even though I was completely sure that partying in the midst of sweaty people was not my thing. 7th% of the people in attendance at that bachelor party were men, and that spooked me out at the beginning. Even though the groom told his married male friends to bring their partners to the party, it was still male-dominated because some of them didn't care to invite their partners or not. Many of his friends were married. I don't know which one it was, but I just know that I saw more men with short, low-cut hair than I saw women with their long hair. Or maybe I just couldn't tell their genders because everyone was wearing a mask and costume. I don't really know. I held on tight to Frederick at first, but I later let go of him and let him interact with his friends. He took off his mask to interact with his friends, but I kept kind on. I actually started having fun at the party, and it was very shocking to me. I didn't even have to dance or interact to have fun. I just sat and watched how crazy people can be. Most times my mouth was left open because of how much weird stuff I saw. I didn't even care that I was one of the very few people that just sat down and observed everything. I didn't have a problem with that because I was just fine observing. It was even better that I could not see their faces and they could not see that I was staring. I still remember everything and the loud music that almost made me deaf. I had fun at the beginning and I can't deny it. Well, only at the beginning because the party didn't even go well for me at all. At some point into the party, the groom grabbed a I didn't even know was there and made an announcement. He said there was going to be a game of truth or dare at the party, and he needed volunteers. Let me just tell you guys that while the groom was making the announcement, I just sat down and munched on the snacks I was served and sipped on my drink even though I didn't even know what was mixed inside. I didn't even think of being a participant, and it never crossed my mind that I would need to participate in something like that. I was initially just excited to watch what everyone would do, and I was racking my brain to think of the possible games he would make people play. That's why I actually got surprised when Frederick came to my side and asked me to go volunteer and play the truth or dare game. I knew it was Frederick because I had to remove his mask and do a double take even after I saw the burnt edges on the mask. I actually asked him if he was crazy because I knew that I was not going to do what he was asking me to do. I'd not heard of any husband that would give his wife permission to volunteer for a truth or dare game when he knew what kind of stuff went on in such games. Frederick actually told me he was serious and that he really wanted me to participate in the game. I boldly told him no because it was not something I was interested in at all. He pulled me to the side and decided to taunt me. He asked me if it was wrong for him as a man to want his woman to do something crazy. He started pointing to the wives of his friends and how some of them were already standing with the groom and volunteering to play the game. I told him I was different and that I would never play a truth or dare game with strangers. He didn't budge or try to change his words. He decided to date me to go volunteer, or else he'd know that I was trying to chicken out and that I was just looking for an excuse to get on his nerves. Well, after hearing that from my own husband, I didn't think twice before deciding to give him a taste of his medicine. I remembered the discussion I had with my sisters and how she always encouraged me never to give him a reason to compare me with other women. I didn't want to do it, but just because I was tired of constantly getting compared and taunted, I decided to do it. I also wanted to show him that just because I refused to do certain things and respect his name didn't mean that I was a fool. I asked him to give me $200 before going in $300 when I finished. It was my only condition for getting into the game. He agreed, but made sure he told me just how much he didn't believe that I'd actually play the game. I left him standing alone and went to join the people that were volunteering to play the game. My husband kept giving me thumbs up even before the hand started, but I didn't even care to answer him. I was very angry, and I am still angry. It just made very little sense to me that he wasn't even appreciating the fact that I wanted to be faithful to him and not try to disrespect him or cross boundaries. Any man in his shoes would have been very happy to have a wife whose character and morals didn't contradict with the boundaries that a marriage was supposed to have. He didn't know that I could be extra if I wanted to and that I just didn't want to. At that point, I already had everything to the extreme and I was not ready to have more of it. All I wanted to do was just put an end to his unnecessary comparisons and baits. A part of me also wanted to teach him a big lesson, and now that I've seen what my actions are making him do, I'm quite certain that I really did teach him a very big lesson. The game had been open to both the men and the women, and everyone had been open to play the game. But for some reason, the men dominated the game, and my guess was because the men's population had outdid the one of the women. We were 15 in total that volunteered to play the game, and we were divided into 5 groups with 3 people in each team. My team had 2 men, and I was the only woman on the team. I'd never seen such a truth or dare game where the players were divided into teams, but that was the first time I saw something like that. We all had our masks on as required by the host. At first, everyone just chose the truth because they were scared of being given a very controversial game to play. But the rules were changed and dare was very compulsory. At first, my team members were kind enough to play the game for me and take drinks on my behalf, but it was soon my turn and I could not hide any longer. I was dared to kiss one of the men in another team. It wasn't just any type of kids. It was meant to be a French kiss, and there was no getting out of it. Since my team members had helped me most of the game, I had to do it. I had the choice of taking a drink, but I refused. I didn't want to take a drink because at that moment, I was extremely angry at Frederick. I just hated everything he did to me, and I decided to kiss the guy in front of me. Yes, I did what I did. I gave him a French kiss, and that was it. I didn't even give it a second thought because I wanted to let loose, like you told me to let loose. He has been disturbing me so much, and that was why I decided to give him a taste of his medicine. After I did what I did, I looked up, and I saw my husband without his mask. He was very angry as he looked at me, and I could tell that he had been furious that I did not refuse the dare. His friend was even talking to him, but he didn't bother to answer his friend. He just walked out of the party furiously. I didn't even try to run after him. I just removed my mask and rolled my eyes. His friends recognized me as his wife, and they were also surprised that I had taken the dare. Some of them could not even hide the shock on their faces. I don't know, got to explain that feeling to you guys because it was just a lot. I didn't have to run after Frederick to know that he had been angry after what I did. I knew that he was very furious with my actions and he wanted to react by just walking out. I felt very victorious because I gave him the taste of the medicine he had been giving me. How could a person be as stupid as Frederick was? What did he think I would do when he kept daring me to go and play a game of truth or dare? Did he expect me to just stand and watch him trample all over me? Who bites their wife and then expects them to be as innocent as a clear water? Well, guys, I didn't give him that opportunity and I did what I did. Do I regret it? No. I don't regret it because if I was the one telling my husband to go play a game of truth or dare, society will accuse me of asking him to cheat on me. I kissed a stranger and I did so with my head up high. I left the party only after it ended. I stayed back and had enough drinks and food. If I kept being asked to let loose, it was only time till I actually let loose. His friends kept walking up to me and asking where he was. I don't think there's anyone there who didn't know about what happened between me and Frederick that night. The fact that he was no longer in the room after I kissed a guy just explained everything that happened between us. They kept meeting me and urging me to go look for him. I didn't bother looking for him because it did not make sense that he suddenly chickened out after dating me not to chicken out. There are many parties I'd wanted to walk out on, but I refused just because I accompanied him. But he wanted to take things extra, and I complied. I later discovered that Frederick left in his car about an hour before I left the party. One of his friends offered to drop me off, but I refused and just took a cab. When I got to the house, I came to the house. I came home to trouble, literally. Frederick just started arguing immediately. I dropped key purse on the table. He asked me in his exact words, "How dare you kiss another guy while I was in the room? How dare you even kiss another guy?" Of course, I didn't keep quiet and just look at him like they do. I'm those daily soaps. I spoke up for myself and told him how he literally frustrated me and led to do what I did. The action was done by me, but everything that led to it was my husband's fault, and I told him that straight to his face. He accused me of cheating on him and disrespecting him in his friends present, and he told me that I had been looking for an excuse to cheat on him. I asked him what he was really expecting when he baited me to go play a truth or dare game at a bachelor's party with adults. I had to ask him if he expected me to go there and play Cinderella. Frederick kept looking for excuses that questioned my character and paint me out as a bad person, but I refused. Frederick told me he was just not ready to accept my reasons for kissing another guy in his presence, and I told him that I was not ready to accept his reasons for baiting his wife to a truth or dare game. I didn't apologize because I didn't think that he deserved one, and that seemed to only trample on his ego more. I could tell that he hated my attitude and the way I refused to accept I was wrong. He wanted an apology, and I just promised myself that I was never going to give him one. So Frederick grabbed a pillow and a blanket, and then he threw them out for me and locked himself in the bedroom so I couldn't come out. I mean, how messed up is that? He's the one that didn't want to sleep in the same room with me. Why did he have to pick me out like that? Wasn't he supposed to be the one that left the room? I decided to just forget about it and sleep in the guest room. The next morning, I discovered that Frederick left the house before I even woke up, and for the past 2 weeks, he's left the house before I woke up and came back when I slept. I just realized that he's been visiting anyone that cares to listen, and he's been trying to trample on my character and make me give in. I've gotten calls from some of my sisters and even my stepbrother. I mean, I don't get why he's telling them instead of telling me. If I've offended you too much, have a conversation with me. Stop trying to recruit people so that they can follow you and try paint me as the one who's wrong. I've gotten calls from his mother and siblings, and I know his mother is finally happy that the wrong girl her son married is finally showing her true colors. I heard that's what she's been saying around the house. I got so frustrated that I started writing this because I just needed to tell people. Frederick is frustrating me. It's actually annoying. It got worse today when I got a call from my parents. Both of them, especially my mother, have asked to see me, and I was supposed to be there yesterday, but I decided to go today. Now, I got carried away writing this, and I've noticed that time is not on my side anymore. I'll have to cancel and go tomorrow. Update. Well, my life gets more complicated, I guess. So, I spoke to my parents, and they told who husband visited them and told them I kissed another man. My father asked me if it was true, and I said yes. He asked me why I disrespected my husband, and I just told him that it was a truth or dare game, and Frederick dared me to play it. I didn't tell him the full story because I was aware that my father was looking for an opportunity to tell me how right he was about me marrying Frederick. My mother called me to the side and asked me what I planned on doing. I just told her I'd not let things get out of hand. I went back home and thankfully I found my husband there. I told him that we needed him. We should stop letting such things get. I'm the way of our marriage. I apologized for kissing another guy in his presence, and then I told him why I did what I did. It was Frederick's turn to speak up. He didn't apologize or take accountability for pushing me to the point I'd ended up in. Not once in his long speech did he take responsibility for taunting me and baiting me to attend parties and cobes when he was aware that I preferred not to. He didn't accept the fact that he was wrong for forcing me to participate too. And that was all I needed to know, that I had married a conceited and egoistic man, and I was not ready to go down that lane. Instead of trying to work things out, he told me he wanted to get a divorce because he was not ready to accept what I did. My husband just dumped me right in front of me, and then he went upstairs to his room and brought out divorce papers. Initially, I wanted to talk him out of it, but when I realized that he had the divorce papers ready for a while, and he refused to tell me and just waited to get an apology like he was entitled to it, I decided that it was in my favor to dump the fool. I never expected something like that to lead to a divorce. It's literally not that deep, lol. I should be angry too, but I never tried to raise my voice and paint him as the bad guy. I always respected him, yet he kept on pushing me to the wall. I signed the divorce papers and tossed it on the table. He already signed it, so all he needed to do was go give them to his lawyer. I asked him for the $300 I was supposed to have for taking the bait, but he refused and called me greedy. Well, I didn't care and still don't care. If he wants to be petty and divorce me for something that was both our faults, I'd be petty all I want. I told him to keep it anyway, and that I'd get it from the spousal support. During our divorce proceedings, his lawyer offered the house in turn for the spousal support, but I refused. I don't need his house. My father's house is not closed to me. I did get the spousal support, and I didn't settle for less. He wanted a divorce, and I gave him one. I didn't ask for the divorce, he did, and his reason is just stupid. I got fired from the restaurant instantly, but I don't care. Ego, what's to work for their ex anyway? My father hasn't kissed a chance to tell me just how right he was. In fact, I think he prayed for this lull. My mom is the one who didn't like the idea of her firstborn girl being the first to get divorced. According to her, she wished I'll get the first and last to get divorced and that it never happens again. I pray too, and I hope I don't marry another Frederick redesigned. To all the guys out there, don't bait your wife to a truth or dare game if you don't want her to do something that could potentially disrespect you. It's common sense. Did I learn my lesson? Yes, I did. I should have refused to take the bait. That's where I was wrong. I should have just asked for a divorce, because any man that puts unnecessary pressure and comparison on his wife is no man at all. The same goes for women. Well, I'm back to working for my father, so the sack letter Frederick delivered to me doesn't change a thing. By the way, Frederick, if you ever get to see this, just know that you are the biggest mistake I ever made. Period.